Welcome to the Gravity Well podcast with me, Jenny Yeremy. I host the Gravity Well to celebrate and share the stories of people looking to empower others with the knowledge and skills required to reestablish stability in our communities. My mission is to work through heavy issues in conversation and process in order to lighten the load. I acknowledge that I live on the traditional territories of Treaty 7 and Métis Districts 5 and 6. The treaties and self-governance agreements established by Indigenous peoples were created to honor the laws of the land, maintain balance with nature, and give back to uphold reciprocal relationships. This knowledge and intention are what guide the Gravity Well conversations. I ask for genuine dialogue, real hearts, and openness to different perspectives. This is your invitation to find common ground with me. Positions taken by participants, either individually or collectively, do not necessarily represent those of the Gravity Well. This podcast is dedicated to the natural world, our children, nieces, nephews, grandchildren, and all future generations. The Gravity Well is on YouTube and streaming wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you see and hear, remember to like and subscribe. I'm pleased to welcome Kennedy Halvorson and Cornelis Kolijn into the studio today. Kennedy joined Bob Morrison and me for our final episode of Water in Southern Alberta, where we discussed the future. I highly recommend you listen to it. It was a stellar conversation. Kennedy, I remember you leaving me with this thought of things being emblematic, really looking at every piece and understanding that if you see this one problem, it's a symbol that that problem is widespread. So it's such a tremendous discussion. I highly suggest you look at it. Kennedy is a conservation specialist with Alberta Wilderness Association. She has a BSc in biochemistry and a graduate degree in environmental studies focused on native plants and pollinator conservation. That bee movie really was a message for us, wasn't it? Today, Kennedy is my co-host and is going to cut through the misinformation around coal mining. Welcome back to the studio, Kennedy. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Jenny. My work at AWA is focused on conservation issues related to water, mining, species at risk, and the eastern slopes. So while I've got a good handle on the environmental risks posed by coal, I'm eager to hear more from your guest today, who's worked in the industry himself.
Yes, so we are both really pleased to be speaking with Cornelis. Cornelis graduated from Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands. He has worked for over 40 years in international mining and of metallurgical coal, as well as coke and ironmaking. He's worked in countries across the globe, from Canada to Europe to Australia and all over Asia. He's worked for Teck Resources as late as 2019, and since then has been a consultant for metallurgical coal and coke making, including hydrogen-based direct reduction processes, accessing alternatives to blast furnaces. He mentors young engineers and geologists. Welcome to the studio, Cornelis. Thank you very much for being here. Is there anything I missed in an intro you'd like to give, please?
No, you've been quite good. Thanks so much. I'm pleased to participate today. Please go ahead.
Really excited to hear from you. Okay, so let's get right into it. We have several questions. So please begin by explaining what you know about the coal deposits in Southern Alberta's East Slopes. This is a thickness comparison to other coal deposits in the world, let's say. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So let's focus today especially on the Crow's Nest area. So the Japanese were heavily invested in the coal mining out there. They were joint owners, joint venture partners, and they also imported that coal into Japan big time. So if you look at the difference between this coal basin in the Sparwood area and in, say, the Crow's Nest area, say the grassy area and the Chinook North, South, going all the way up to Tent Mountain, Montem at the moment, you can see there's significant difference. It's the same deposit, but the coal seams are generally thinner. The geology is very complex, lots of folding and faulting. And on the eastern side of the front ranges, this coal-bearing strata, where the coal, seams are layered, is much thinner. It's 600 meters thick in the Elk Valley, which produces a prime hardcore coal, top world prices. But now you go to, say, the grassy area, and the coal-bearing strata is only 100 meters thick. Quite complex geology, faulting in the seams, expensive to mine, and also much lower quality, because not all coal is the same. Basically, coal is a fossil organic material, and it's originated in very diverse woods and swamps and so on. So the coal from going from, say, west to east into the past is very different in composition, also in its coal petrography, that is carbon forms in the coke. It was, although maybe around the same time, quite a different vegetation, and it has big impact on the quality of these coals.
I went to the Grassy Mountain site. I did the tour with Northback Holdings last year, I think it was, and it's very clear, like you're saying, Cornelis, it's both thin and vertical. It would be very difficult to mine in a lot of places just from that massive thinning and this obvious issue in terms of it, the way it's laid, the bedding is laid. Okay, go ahead, Kennedy.
Yeah, absolutely. So it seems like many of the locations that the coal industry is currently looking to mine in Alberta are sites that have been explored or mined before, like including Grassy Mountain and Ted Mountain. Why would prior companies and investors have abandoned these deposits in the first place?
The Japanese were heavily invested, as I said, and they used that coal. But what happened then in the 60s, 70s, got an acceleration of technology. So you had small pot tea kettle blast furnaces where you're charging the coal and the coke 350 cubic meters. And up to now they went to 2,000 cubic meters, 3,000 cubic meter internal volume. Plus the process conditions became a lot more critical to get to ever higher efficiencies, to use less and less coke, so lower costs, and also higher and higher quality iron ore. Because iron ore also contains, say, silica, gangstone, and if you charge that into the blast furnace with coke, you get not only hot metal, but you also get slag, which is like lava. So basically, a blast furnace is like a small volcano, but you want to have as little as possible slag. Slag comes from not only iron ore, but also ash in coal. And if you increase the efficiency with blast furnace, you need a higher quality coke. A lot higher, so you need higher quality coal. Well, in the eastern slopes and in the grassy area, that's just not available. In increasing their efficiencies and thereby lowering their production costs, they looked at all the other alternatives. So you can go to Australia, prime hard coal, which is, by the way, closer than the Elk Valley to major markets in Asia. Yeah, but also in the Elk Valley, mining technology improved, so they could also take down, basically mine the mountains in the Elk Valley, which had prime hard coking coal, what the blast furnaces require. So also POSCO, that is the South Koreans and Japan, started to invest, but also take coal from the Elk Valley. And they just shut down all these mines with all the complications. And there were some underground mines with enormous amount of gas. Well, that's also methane emissions in the atmosphere, don't forget. Yeah. So they abandoned these mines and they moved to the Elk Valley as their customers. Basically, that's the thing, is driving the blast furnace technology, the push for higher quality input, higher quality coke, so coal and iron ore. And what's happening now, it's even progressing. So they need ever higher quality coke, also to reduce not only the energy, but the carbon footprint, which is increasingly important also in the customer markets, more and more like in Europe, also looking at the carbon footprint of the steel they would buy from abroad. So all this pushes towards the closure of these mines and them not being really of interest.
I'm hearing Grassy Mountain is the opposite of what the market trended between technology and the need for higher quality coal. It fell to the wayside for its neighbor in Elk Valley, which was a higher quality coal. And also, as you mentioned, people moved to mines that were closer to the markets, to the customers.
Yes.
So lots of opportunity for this area to stop production for those reasons. Thank you for that. Okay, so we had revisited this project in the past, so let's talk about this a little bit, Cornelis. Back in 2021, there was the joint review panel that dismissed this project from public interest. Would you mind just explaining to folks what was the outcome of the joint review panel, please?
Yeah, so that's correct. So what did the judge said? The impact of mining on the Rockies Eastern Slopes watershed and the reduced polluted water flow should be weighed against Alberta's high dependence on the irrigation sector. Lethbridge agriculture, food and manufacturing is directly impacted by the Oldman River watershed. They have a total economic activity of more than 4 billion annually. So the joint decision, it stated that the Grassy coal mine project is not in the public interest. The expected employment, related spending and economic benefits in the region will not be realized. The project has the potential to impose negative impacts on other economic sectors, while other risks in Benga's estimates that are not assessed could reduce the positive economic outputs. And this is key, because what they presented in the joint review panel was say hard coking coal projection. But there's 3 seams being mined there. And number 1 seam is key. Well, it will be almost depleted after the first 2 years, even in the reduced mine plan they're planning now. So you get implosion of the quality and the market value of that coal, certainly after the 2 years, no matter the mine plan yet now or the so-called new mine plan, of which we have insufficient detail. They just high-graded the exploration data that were available at the time in 2020 to estimate the quality and market value of their coal, which after the first 2 years implodes anyways. If you look at some indicators like CSR or the fluidity, how it interacts with other coals or making coke as it sort of semi-melts in the coke oven, it's just not the quality the market is looking for. Now, having said that, there's prime hard coking coal in the Elk Valley and in Australia, and they get the top value, the top price in the market, as benchmarked against the coal coming from Hay Point, Queensland, Australia. Yeah, that coal from the Grassy is worth 80% of that value at most, if not less, because also its melting properties are quite inferior compared to the Elk Valley. So there's no real good reason why they would mine that coal. And you said in the mine tour, you saw these coal seams. Well, they've been exposed now. The mine's been shut for 60 years? What you see there is all oxidized. It's useless anyways. And if it would have been that high value when they shut the mine down, why would they leave it in place? So that coal, they have to dig much deeper to get to an unoxidized coal, which you need, because otherwise it won't melt to make coke. But then how far does that go, that seam? It will be closed, that seam, depleted after the first 2 years anyways. So, and if you go to the Elk Valley and Australia, they've got prime hard coking coal, and the same mine also has a bit discounted lower quality products. So just like you go to the supermarket, you've got your prime steak and then you've got your discount steak. Yeah. And then if you've got a cargo, you've got, say, 7 holes on the ship, then there will be, say, 5 or 6 holes of prime quality, and then the discount comes in the smallest last hole, probably at the bow. That's how it works. But you cannot run the mine alone on discount coal. That's the issue.
So under Peter Lougheed's 1976 coal policy, for almost half a century, Alberta had pretty clear and protective policy restricting coal from being mined in the eastern slopes. But since 2020, the government's indecision and backpedaling has really muddied the waters. Can you outline some of the consequences of this?
The UCP government here in Alberta is flip-flopping policies all the time. And there's lots of backroom discussions with these Australian coal mines. And they're just compromising our government. That's all they're doing. And if you look at Benga Riversdale, first they committed a $4 billion fraud in Mozambique. Well, for Teck Resources, I assessed coal deposits throughout the world to see if it would be worthwhile to invest in. So we got this unique opportunity to invest in Mozambique. Well, pretty soon I saw that the value just was not there. But Rio Tinto, one of the biggest iron ore companies in the world, was so foolish to buy it for $4 billion. It was a major blunder, and they sold it to SAIL 2 years later for only $50 million. Well, SAIL is the Steel Authority of India. I know that too professionally, that company. So now they're in it, Vale did the same basically for the Brazilian. They're also out of it now. Yeah. So, but that was a different company. Now Benga is looking for other opportunities in the world. Welcome, Alberta. Here's our Minister of Industry at the time, writes a one-pager. Come and enjoy yourself in Alberta, like it's an invitation, like coming on a ski holiday. And they move right in. Like the First Nations in Alaska kept them out, but they move right in Alberta. And they get Hancock Prospecting, Miss Gina Reinhardt, so ill-advised, to put it politely, to buy this for $700 million. Now, how the hell is she going to get her money back? That is by playing the UCP, to be very blunt. The best thing is they started with a $7 billion claim. Now they reduce it to $2 billion. Look at AB Law blog. It's an enormous legal quagmire they have created with also Brian Jean, declaring this an advanced project. No, it has been dead for 60 years. It was declared non-viable in the joint review panel, which I shot the quality to pieces. They had Thornton make an economic assessment, which was holes in it. Also, economists looked at it. They had to withdraw it. So how can she get her money back, guys? Either get another foolish investor or play the UCP, to be very blunt. Yeah.
Right. And they and others have been suing nonstop here. We've already paid out over 150 million to coal companies.
Okay, this was Elan Atrum. And the last shareholder presentation they held, like a PowerPoint, in 2020, they said, well, they didn't have enough proof that they had a viable resource because the complex geology that was just north of Grassy, adjacent to Grassy to the north. And having said that statement, they started to sue the UCP and got $145 million out of it because they said, yeah, but now if you have to go underground, it's not viable. It was never viable in the first place, people. Yeah. And then you've got Montem, and Montem said it would be valuable coal. They played with the coal quality, and it's quite technical, but it just isn't there. It shut down in '83, doing a lower grade coal for the cement industry. It isn't there. So that was their first thing, but they were playing the Australian Stock Exchange, which is very liberal. Yeah. And then they said, now we'll make hydrogen. Hooray, the next scam. Well, hydrogen, you need 9 tons of water, according to chemistry, stoichiometrically, for a ton of hydrogen. But you've got losses, so you need 13 tons or more of water. The water is not there, but they got more money out of it from the stock exchange. Then they shelved it, although still presented to the gullible public in Alberta. And then they said, but now we've got pumped hydro. But dear people, the water is not there, but they got EDCO to invest 20 million in it. And now they get a stay away payoff by the Alberta government of $90 million. But they said they'll continue for Vickery North, for Vickery Mine. Well, I know how that was manipulated because I also got, for my company, the opportunity to invest in this fantastic opportunity. Well, they've got 2 bookkeepings, and I spoke with people who worked there at the time about mine. It just isn't there, that coal. So, but they will continue to sue. But that's, for Montem, falsification 3 times in a row, and they keep coming.
Right. So their flip-flopping policies have caused this ongoing fight in the administrative courts, let's say, addressing these false claims of quality coal to get after.
Yeah, no, it does sound like they got their foothold in after that policy was removed, with the giving an image that they're going to extract coal, but now that they've not been able to extract coal, it's looking how can they extract their money elsewhere, and it's going through the courts, which is really unfortunate because then it means that it's the public's taxpayer dollars being paid to these companies who really have done nothing but come in and create a lot of footprint, an unnecessary footprint in what were otherwise pretty intact wilderness areas. So if you go to the Alberta Energy Regulator's website right now, they have a section that discusses metallurgical coal demand. And in that section, they state that, quote, the long distance from mine to market creates a competitive disadvantage for Alberta's exporting coal producers.
Yes.
We've heard from industry that there's a big demand for Alberta coal, but the province's own regulator is not echoing those claims. So I'm wondering if Cornelis, if you can speak to this and global market conditions.
That's a very good one. Gee, they even said that distance is something. Yeah, because I worked for, say, 18, 19 years for the Dutch steel ironmaking, half that time abroad, all over the world, also as a process engineer in consulting. Yeah, and I assessed also for Halvorson's different coal suppliers all over the world. One of the big things for Europe was that the distance, but it's also for India, the distance. And India is the only market that say that projections in the next 5 years to expand its import, whereas more than that, China is imploding the same. Yeah, and so transportation, this is very, I also with negotiations with India, they always said, but we want you to pay the higher, the difference in freight rate for us. Otherwise we won't buy your coal, always. But they couldn't get around it because our coal had very specific qualities they really needed. So we got virtually the top price compared to Australian prime hard coking coal. Because in Delft Valley it's got some very unique properties that coal, which are totally lacking in the crow's nest area. And now if you look at the metallurgical coal demand in the world, and 2024, there were, say, various scenarios how the metallurgical coal market would develop going to 2050. Yeah, so looking at technology, but also maybe that the world will be more conscious of the environmental impact of coking coal and coke. Yeah, and it's interesting that Wood Mac in the end of 2024, August, made, say, a summary of 3 quite, at the time, prevalent scenarios. And things have changed quite a bit since. But they saw that going from 2023 to 2050, the metallurgical coal demand would be reduced by, say, 20% in the base case. A base case is just general evolution. But if you push harder, say the pledges case, then you see a reduction of 40%. So you go from 1.1 billion tons to 630 million tons only. And of course, it's a bit more in the base case, from 860 million tons, but then you go down to 630 million tons. That's what you see happening. So the global met coal market is contracting, whatever scenario you take. And now it's even more pronounced than in 2024. Because I know from the company I worked for, the European companies, they were to phase out the blast furnaces, coal and coke, for direct reduction gradually. Well, guys, just now, beginning this year, they announced that they will be shutting down these coke plants already in 2029. And they have 2 blast furnaces. 1 blast furnace will remain for the time being, for which they will buy coke. That's it. And Europe, by the year 2030, there will be hardly 1 blast furnace left in Western Europe. Maybe 1 in the UK, but also Scandinavia are moving quickly to direct reduction using methane, but also more and more hydrogen. Now in Sweden is far ahead, hydrogen plant. So hydrogen is still quite expensive, but people are also looking at the environmental cost of coal. So you see an acceleration. In India itself, pollution has become so unsustainable that now also even SAIL, who's very conservative, but also the big companies like Tata and like JSW, they are now also investing, accelerating the transition to direct reduction, because then they can sell their lower carbon product on the world markets, which are now very damn good quality, by the way. Yeah, China also wants to be less dependent on the world market. They're also making big investments in direct reduction. So you see, and also all the countries around the world, also India, China, and Europe, they're using more and more scrap, recycling it. Now, to get a top quality coal for modern cars, you still need some, what they call virgin iron, direct reduced iron, which is really clean to dilute, all the other metals that are in recycled. But that's 20, 30%, depending what you make. So combined with the new direct reduction technology coming online, more use of scrap. There's technology in scrap to upgrade it even further, which actually one of the few things United States Nucor is leading in to make out of scrap steel, high quality steel, is just pushing back production of blast furnaces from 70% now to at most 30% in 2050. That's why you see the metallurgical market decline. So you are now trying to export coal internationally in a declining market. And that's what's happening. And you need higher quality coal. It's so important.
Right. Yeah. So what I heard is, I love that you brought in scrap recycling into this, Cornelis, because it's just so key that people understand that a lot of what we need to use now is the stuff that's already out of the ground. And we're just taking what we minimally need to add to that. And like you said, in very high quality conditions, again, knowing that climate policy is also good economic policy, and that's the demand destruction that we're seeing regardless of that. I did want to throw into here, because I learned from my neighbor that Teck Resources, one of their biggest businesses in Canada today, is battery recycling. Yes. They have a whole page dedicated to the circularity of this battery system. So it's just really, there's a demonstration for you right there that a coal company is moving towards a circular economy.
I can add that Teck sold it, of course, to Glencore. And that has a reason. Also, BHP in Australia sold off to other companies its lower value coal mines, like producing coal, sort of like Grassy Mountain coal. They're selling it off to speculative coal mines, and there's more companies doing it. Glencore is also rehashing its coal, but Teck now is out of coal, focusing on copper. Is maybe going to try to merge with Anglo, who is also reassessing what it still has on coal. Yeah. And what I want to say, they're going to build a recycle plant in Trail. And nowadays, with the modern batteries, you can recycle about 95% of what's in the battery. And that battery material is even of higher quality than initial, because it's more porous. So it's like a sponge, you've got more surface area. So you get better exchange of ions. It's even more efficient. And now in Ontario, I think they're also going to build 1 or 2 battery recycling plants. It's just happening so fast that
Rocky Mountain Institute has an excellent podcast or a webinar I'll share with this about the 6 ways that battery recycling can be fully circular, to your point about the fact that we do not need to be mining for new things at all in our eastern slopes. Okay, so let's move forward to what is Canada doing? Can we talk a little bit about what's happening in our steelmaking industry? And then you also did mention some others, but maybe highlight a couple more things that you're seeing. Thank you.
Okay, so now we've got, of course, the one which is ahead of the curve is Algoma. So Algoma shut down its coke plants, and it has some problems. I visited. I know that coke plant. They're rid of it last January. They still had some coke lying around, and then they shut their blast furnace down last March. It's over. Now they're having an advanced electric arc furnace technology where they melt scrap. Of course, they can't make the top quality, so now they need some virgin iron again, which will be hopefully direct reduced iron, more and more of it. Now you go to Stelco. Stelco has been struggling, as you know, and US Steel tried to kill it for its own markets and all that stuff. And then, fortunately, it was bought by Cleveland-Cliffs. And it doesn't have any transition plans yet, but I know Cleveland-Cliffs, notwithstanding the regressive Trump administration, is investing in direct reduction. So I think that Stelco eventually, if they wish to keep it alive, they only have 1 blast furnace left on the lake, that they will also get access to direct reduced iron or from Cleveland-Cliffs, because Cleveland-Cliffs bought all the most of the ArcelorMittal North American business about, 4 or 5 years ago, and they started also in transition to direct reduction. Of course, now Trump is slowing everything down, and then you go to the Fosco ArcelorMittal. They said they plan to transition, but there's no timeline yet. But the thing is, Algoma's gone, and the natural supplier of the Canadian steel industry in Ontario is the very close Appalachian region in the United States. So they don't need Western Canada. We tried to export a bit, but it was less and less. They are relying on Appalachians. Now, the United States, the steel industry, yeah, they won't import coal from very far. It is only very minor what we could export there anyways, because they also take coal from the Appalachians. So for international coal trade, seaborne coal trade, yeah, it's not of interest to the United States, mostly. They get most of their coal from the Appalachians. So forget about exporting Canadian coal within North America. You really are hooked on South Korea, Japan, and also India. I think I mentioned scenarios that the seaborne coal, it can easily, say, reduce by 30% going to 2050 or maybe more. Also, because now also in India, they're pushing, they will keep in most blast furnaces to go to new technology where you can reduce the coke consumption per blast furnace by at least a third, if not more. Again, that is less coke, less coal required. It's happening right now. Yeah, not only are we transitioning, although there's lots of investment required, and it will take a bit of a slower process to direct reduction, but you got more scrap, and you get ever higher efficiency blast furnaces, which need ever higher quality coke. That's why Coal India is looking to invest and get high quality coal from Queensland, Australia. They're not looking at Canada.
Cornelis, I want to ask a little bit about the actual process of mining coal. So when you look at the production stats for coal in Alberta from the AER, it shows that around, on average, 36% of extracted raw met coal is discarded as waste during the processing component of mining. If prospective miners like Northback are projecting they'll produce 2.5 million tons annually, which we already think might be a little bit suspect, but if that's what their projections are, that means that 1.4 million tons of waste rock will be produced each year at their processes, which is liable to leaching contaminants into the surrounding environment. Can you speak to some of the risks here from this their mining operation?
Yeah, okay, so you've got two types of waste when you mine coal, yeah? So you've got this pit sitting in the mountain, and then you have to blast the overlying overburden, you call it, to get to the coal seams, to develop it. Well, in doing so, you get 30%, approximately 30% swell. So for every cubic meter of rock you get 1.3 cubic meters of rock. You increase it. The amount of coal you get out of the seam relatively is not that much. So now you have to crowd everything back into that pit, which will not happen because as you mine the mountaintop, the pit actually also gets smaller. So now you've got more rock than you started with, so you have to stockpile that on the slopes, which can be pretty steep. So you need a lot of money to create a stable waste rock stockpile, which of course will also then leach through with rainwater. So then you also have the mill tailings. And that's about a third of the raw coal you mine is tailings, which is rock, or you call high ash, we call it as miners, rock material in your coal seam. And that's concentrated. You wash out the coal, and you've got your tailings left. What to do with the tailings? You can make massive tailing ponds, like you have at Fording River, but already they started high density slurry pumping 10, 15 years ago at Elkview to really compact it and dry it. And so contain the tailings. And how now to look at how to sequester these dried tailing cake. And also Northwest Coal there in Crown Mountain in BC is looking at it. They've got probably a high value coal, which can bear quite some costs. Yeah, which of course Grassy will never be able to bear the cost for good remediation. But then you have your waste rock stockpile, and then you've got a layer of tailing. And you have to compact it to get an anoxic layer on top, because then it won't leach, or you'll limit the leachate in this pile. But that stockpile has to be, the waste pile I mean, has to be absolutely stable. Takes a lot of time, but also the slope can't be too steep, so it will grow into the valley next door to it. And then still quite a lot of the selenium is contained in the rock layer directly below and above the coal seam, generally speaking. Yeah, so rain will fall on it. You can't capture all selenium contaminated runoff, and part of it will also end up in the groundwater. You can't stop that happening. And from that, it will flow into the creeks and into Oldman River or whatever watershed is there. That's the big thing. Yeah. So you really have to control your waste piles, where you dump it, how you dump it. It has to be absolutely stable. And we already know there's slumping waste rock at Tent Mountain, which is Montem now. There's also slumping the old waste piles around even Grassy. And then you get red flow. And there's an old, also, I think it was called the old Green Hills mine. You also had a Green Hills mine there, flowing and contaminating the waters there from the Crow's Nest River. So it's very tricky to contain all groundwater. That's also why in Crown Mountain they say they're also going to pump and treat the groundwater. You can't avoid it. And from experience, the first mine I worked in, well, first I worked underground as a student in Germany for my master's thesis, yeah? And you can see that even underground, you get disturbance above ground, and it will also reverse and deflect the water flow there. You've got rivers flowing 4 meters above the countryside because of coal mining. So much was taken away over the centuries there. Yeah. Well, the same happens here. For the USP government, underground's out of mind. No, the disturbance is right up to the surface because it goes room and pillar. The pillars will collapse, and it will impact even the groundwater and the flow above, even after the mine has been abandoned, long after it. Yeah. So you be very careful with your containment of water. And then they also need water for Grassy, any mine. So you look at what the mill will use, and you can recycle part of it. That's okay. But if you look at the water balance, they never showed a complete water balance. Not only the mill requires water, but it's high wind area there, by the way, the Crow's Nest area. Yeah. And they had a weather station there. They presented the results at the Joint Review panel, but conveniently, it always drops out above the 80 kilometers an hour wind. Yeah, but there will be huge dust. So how do you suppress it? By spraying copious amount of water. Did they include that? You need a whole water balance. Then you've got your raw coal stockpile before you wash it. How much water is that to suppress the dust? You have to spray it like hell. And then you've got your clean coal stockpiles. You have to spray it again. That mine will take significant amounts of water. And then they said, oh, we only use so much and we use groundwater. But if you take groundwater away, it won't feed the Oldman River or the Crow's Nest River. It's gone, that water. It's evaporated. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, groundwater, it's all connected. Surface water, groundwater, it's all connected. And okay, what I want people to hear when you just highlighted this is there's no technology here. We're talking about a stockpile. We're talking about a tailings pond. We're talking about trying to contain something on super extreme sloped sides, knowing that there's high winds. There is a historic record of mine collapse.
The first mine I worked at after graduating for the European steel industry, they were joint venture partners, was Oaky Creek, Queensland, Australia, prime hard coking coal. And we had the Sandy Creek at that time for the government. And we had to, from the government, Queensland, to divert it. And not a drop was allowed to flow into the mine, but also not a drop of water was allowed to flow out of the mine. It's quite, how do you call it, dry area there, Oaky Creek, yeah? And since then, they had conservative governments, and it was relaxed. So if you can see that when I worked at Oaky Creek, just satellite imaging is excellent nowadays. You see nice roads, nice reclamation. After that, they made a mess of it, basically. And the mine next door, German Creek, was partly owned by Shell. It was messy like hell. So we already knew then, in the mid-80s, you had to contain all the water flowing into and not allow water flowing off the mine site. Well, that's not possible in this hilly terrain. It's just not possible.
Thinking about the issue of like the undermining and changing the topography, I know there has been claims from like both government and industry that underground mining would be a safer option to do some of the containment. But I do also want to repeat what Cornelis has pointed out of this issue of undermining. You can get changes to the topography, which can change the drainage. It can change how water passes from the surface to the groundwater stores, but also highlight some examples here in Alberta. The one underground mine that's still sort of in operation is CST Coal Limited. I don't know if they're actually producing anything from it right now or trying to produce. But there was a good paper that came out that showed that the underground mining operations that had been there historically have now caused such large historical deformations in the ground that it is now, like, the researchers concluded that it's at risk of like sliding out and causing a lot of damage to the Smoky River water system that it's right nearby. So that's also a risk that comes with underground mining that I think is not as well understood, but should be emphasized. And it should be pointed out that underground mining does have risks, and unlike what some are trying to claim.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. It does have risks. And when I worked in Germany, you had to backfill certain areas of the mine. So then you've got your tailings or waste rock. Now you don't have as much waste rock by far when going underground compared to, of course, open pit mining or mountaintop removal. But you had to bring that in either mechanically or pneumatically. It was enormously expensive. These mines will never generate the cash flow to do that. So rumor pillar, the pillars will collapse. And you also see pictures from CST mine along the Peace River. You can see it's just right up to the river, and they've got multiple effluent violations by year. Then the minimum sort of reclamation you have to do is about, well, I read some time ago, $80 million. That's a pittance. They can't even pay for that. And then they just they just pay a parking fee of $9,000 in a year to the UCP government. Like, it's incredible. And then without any due process, Valerie is allowed to open mine number 14, isn't it? I know that CST, Brent Cash, always had quality issues. I think they will have the same. They had a power station there mining that coal. Now all of a sudden it's prime hard coking coal. And then they also got the Blackstone with very shady ownership anyways. And it's also in a watershed area, even lower area. They start above ground, then go underground, sort of longwall mining. And they will leave like elongated pillars. Of course, they will collapse, guys. And they've got very scanty real evidence of the quality, yeah, as I see that. And then they show an area from mine 14 to that Blackstone, Black Eagle mine. And they project it across the Bow River Basin where I started working. I know very well also professionally after that. And they say they've got 1 billion tons of coal there. Guys, give your head a shake. You're being played. Yeah.
Yeah, it's your example of the stake, where in all of these resources, we're at a place where the stake is now a stir fry, let's say, and that stir fry is spread out in a lot of places and not really easily accessible and not worth getting after. Thank you so much, Cornelis. There was one last question we just wanted to circle around, and maybe even Kennedy, you can help me elaborate on it. Northback had said that they didn't need any water for this exploration project, and now they've put out a new application. Maybe Kennedy, can you first highlight it, and then just kick the last question around water balance to Cornelis for me, please. Thank you.
Yeah. So they had applied for a water term license, which is a request to have like a volume of water allocated to you from the watershed. But the problem is that Southern Alberta is considered a closed basin. So back in 2006, and then it became official in 2007, but there was like very widespread recognition that we'd essentially licensed out too much water for human use than what the rivers could sustain. Rivers need to have a certain volume of flow throughout the year to sustain their function and their health and make sure they will reliably provide high quality and enough quantity of water. And so the basin was closed. You could not issue any more water licenses because it had been over allocated, and it's been that way since 2007. And so Northback's putting in this water term license, requesting that they get a new license when no other new licenses have really been issued, except under very specific circumstances. And the circumstances in which the government can license out water are all to do with essentially protection of the environment. And so we know this is not protective of the environment. It really shouldn't qualify for those exceptions or exemptions, but they've recently requested it, and it's likely not going to be their full request. They might try to also get licensed allocations through water transfers, which is the only way a company can get water licensed to them right now in this basin. but it's not a lot of water comparative to actually other mining operations in Alberta. But it is a lot of water in a watershed that doesn't really have much, right? Like at this point, all flows are necessary, especially in our headwaters region where we have a lot of species at risk critical habitat. Some people might be like, well, what do I care about wildlife? Or like, why do I care if species at risk have enough water in their environment? But these species at risk are our native cold water trout species, who are considered an indicator species. And as they decline, they're representative of the health of the entire watershed. So when you see a really common species like the bull trout start to go on this decline to the point that they're now a threatened species, you know our watersheds are suffering. And so like any amount of flows is meaningful to them, right? Any amount of flows is meaningful to keep their populations around. I think it's really inappropriate to request a license for water in an area that doesn't have any and hasn't been able to license out in like almost the last 20 years.
Like you, meaning the Alberta Wilderness Association, CPAWS, Y2Y, myself,
Livingston landowners, Crow's Nest Conservation Society, a lot of NGOs, ranchers, landowners, folks in the area have pointed this out and said, you know, this water balance doesn't really make sense. As Cornelis mentioned earlier, it seems like there's a lot of operations at the mine site that will require water. It's unclear how they're going to have enough volumes to do so. It's a double-edged sword of like, if they don't use the water, then we're going to have a lot of dust. And the dust comes with its own issues because it goes around the landscape and it carries things that are known carcinogens that then deposits in our landscape. It deposits in our snowpack, which then goes into the watersheds. If they do use the water, then the water is directly going to be touching the surfaces and then at risk of leaching those contaminants. So you either use the water and contaminate it, or you don't use the water and you let dust go everywhere. And so Cornelis can speak to this more, but everyone's really confused about the water balance of this project because it just doesn't seem to be adding up.
Now also, I will, on extending on this, the new exploration program they're going to do. So they're going to drill a few more holes, okay? And some quite deep, maybe even going to underground, I don't know. But the thing is here, what is the objection of the new exploration, these few holes? Well, I fully expect, based on experience, that they will high-grade the results again, so they can up the claim against the Alberta government to pay more, or get somebody foolish enough to buy into it so that they are rid of it and they can recoup some of the Hancock's $700 million. That's, I think, their main driver. And I know people have been involved in these mines, also Elan, which were my former colleagues or even senior vice presidents I reported to. They know what it is, and still they went for the adventure to work with these companies. Why? Yeah.
Yeah, I could not agree more. It seems like when you're doing exploration inside an already defined area, then you're looking to find the best of the best and say that's what it all looks like. I totally agree. It seems very obvious to be a grab potentially for a better settlement. Thank you. Is there anything we missed in this, Cornelis? I really appreciate your time. I appreciate your experience. We're going to include some of the graphics that you've given me as well to help support some of the information you shared today. But any final words before we wrap? And Kennedy, I'll let you do the same as well. Go ahead, yeah. Cornel.
I think it's important that we are really critical at what not only Northback, the other companies claim that the value is. Like also Valerie had some nice reports, so many jobs, but there's no substantiated mine plan around it. Where are your real markets? What is your real market value? How much is it going to cost? Because the moment you start developing your mine, you have to start remediation at the same time. And I don't see that happening. Yeah. So critical questions, your water balance, what's your cash flow, who are your markets, what's your value, where did you test your coal, which labs, because there's labs that will do anything for you. And then also you have to have people with expertise who can assess this. And the government basically really downsized its hydrological survey, its geological survey, and they say, well, industry knows best. No, you are being played by industry now, and not only the coal industry. I would leave it at that.
Wonderful. Kennedy, your last words, please.
Yeah, I think I would just point to the fact that in Alberta, we do have good legislation that speaks to managing the landscape at like a sub-regional and regional level. And that the boundaries of that is defined by kind of our major watershed. So we're managing at a major watershed level. And so it's recognizing that all of the different human uses on the landscape have impacts, and they have impacts to each other. So in the Oldman watershed, or the greater South Saskatchewan River Basin in this case, choosing to mine in our headwaters it has implications for all the industries downstream, which includes a very like profitable agricultural industry. But also, you know, mining or coal mining is not something that's only being interrogated in the Oldman. It's something that they're looking to do in the North Saskatchewan, which is upstream, or which is the major basin that Edmonton is located in. There's coal mining going on in the Smoky River Slave Basin and in the Athabasca. You know, it's also happening upstream of all of those all of the industries downstream. And so if we're managing at this regional level, I think we have to be asking questions of like, do we go in and commit to an industry that has very well-known risks, that is boom and bust, that is providing employment for some time, but not like consistently for a long time, because even the operating mines, we see them close and open to respond to market conditions. Do we commit to that industry that might just be this lost asset moving forward as the markets move away, as steel tries to become more carbon neutral and looks to offset its own emissions? Do we commit to that kind of industry, or do we look to diversify in other ways and protect what is a natural asset, which is these really robust environment and wilderness areas where we have really high levels of biodiversity, which in turn create really high quality ecosystem services and benefits like clean air, clean water, soil retention, soil enrichment, carbon storage, temperature regulation, like climate adaptation and mitigation. I think that's a good question everyone should ask yourselves, is like, is this small industry, because it is a small industry, this is not a major industry in Alberta. Last year, the amount they contributed to the GDP was like maybe, I don't know, I think it was below 20 million. It's not a lot. Is this like worth risking our headwaters for? Is it worth risking those areas, the eastern slopes for?
Yeah, thank you so much for underscoring that.
It's very good what Kenny says here. Kennedy, at the swing mines, there's some good examples in Northeast BC where you see them open and shut with the vagaries of the highly variable coking coal price, the prime. And I've got some graphs too, yeah. And last year even, the coking coal price went down to say $175 per ton. And if you look at the projection of the metallurgical coal outlook for the quarterlies in Australia, which is a very good publication, yeah, they see that the real value by 2027 is projected to be only $187 per ton. So what can these swing mines do? They will not have enough cash flow to really sequester and clean up as they go. And as we saw in the Elk Valley, Teck spent nearly $1.5 billion to catch the selenium in contaminated water, and they can get 95% out. So you hear them crow this number all over the place, also Northback. That's only what you catch, but there's only part of it at best of the runoff you can catch, so you won't catch 95% of selenium. And if you look at the selenium concentration in the Elk River, yeah, that even although Teck is removing 95% of what it can catch, it doesn't have an impact on the selenium, and there might even be peaks above it when there's high flow with the melt in spring. It just doesn't work that way, people.
No. Yeah, you're right. We have proof that this doesn't work elsewhere. There's no reason to assume, especially in a high wind area, it'll be any different. Thank you, Kennedy, for reminding us of my favorite topic, land stewardship. We know what the answers are here. Not messing in where we get our water is a key thing for us to understand. Thank you both very much for your time today. That was a wonderful conversation. Take care for now.